There's a motorcycle engine so powerful, so dangerous, so utterly insane that regulators couldn't let it exist. The Yamaha VMAX, an engine that produced supercar-killing acceleration, terrified insurance companies, and got effectively banned across Europe and Japan. But why would they want it to vanish? This is the shocking truth behind engineering's greatest outlaw. Let's go back to the early 1980s. Yamaha's engineering team had a crazy idea. What if we built a cruiser that could humiliate sport bikes? What if we created something so brutally powerful that it redefined what motorcycles could be? But this wasn't just about building a fast bike. This was about philosophy. Yamaha wanted to prove that engineering excess of pure, unapologetic power was worth celebrating, even if it meant crossing lines that other manufacturers were too afraid to approach. The question they asked themselves was simple. How much power can we give riders before someone tells us to stop? Turns out they found that limit, and they blew right past it. So they built the V4 engine. Now, here's where this gets interesting. Most cruisers use big, lazy V-twins. Reliable, torquey, predictable, boring. Yamaha said, forget that. They grabbed inspiration from sport bikes and drag racing, shoving 4 cylinders into a V configuration rarely seen in cruisers. And the result? Massive displacement, surplus torque, and power delivery that felt like getting kicked by a rocket. But the real genius, the thing that made this engine legendary, was something called V-boost. The V-boost system used servo-actuated mechanisms to open valves, creating what riders described as a second engine kicking in. The surge was intoxicating, like the bike suddenly remembered it had a rage mode. The original VMAX launched in 1985, 145 horsepower in a cruiser. That's insane for the era. Superbikes were barely touching those numbers. And the performance? Sub 11-second quarter miles. Top speeds over 140 miles per hour. This thing was beating supercars off the line, embarrassing Ferraris and Porsches at stoplights. The bike weighed 631 pounds wet, relatively lightweight for a cruiser, which meant that monstrous power turned into absolutely brutal acceleration. Owners described it as terrifying and addictive in the same breath. But here's where the story gets dark, because that power came with consequences. See, the VMAX's engine was too powerful for its own chassis. The steel tube frame, designed in an era before modern engineering simulations, simply couldn't handle the forces this engine generated at high speeds. Riders reported instability, wobbles, and downright dangerous handling when pushing the bike hard. The front end would get light. The rear would step out. At 140 miles per hour, this wasn't just uncomfortable, it was potentially lethal. And that caught the attention of regulators. But if Yamaha knew their VMAX engine was producing power levels that made the motorcycle unstable, potentially dangerous and difficult to control, especially given the limitations of 1980s chassis, technology, and tire compounds, why would they deliberately engineer a system like V-boost that made the power delivery even more violent and sudden, essentially amplifying the very characteristics that made the bike dangerous? And were they actually trying to build something that would eventually get banned? Or was this engineering hubris taken to its absolute extreme? All right, let me tell you exactly what was going on inside Yamaha's headquarters. And the answer is going to surprise you. Yamaha's engineers knew the VMAX was dangerous, they knew it exceeded reasonable power limits, and they did not care. Because this wasn't about building a safe motorcycle. This was about making a statement. Yamaha wanted to prove they could out-engineer, out-power, and outperform everyone else in the industry. The V-boost system wasn't a mistake or an oversight. It was intentional. Yamaha's engineers wanted riders to feel the power, not just have it, but experience it in a visceral, emotional way. Think about it. A smooth, linear power delivery is boring, but a system that creates a surge, a rush, an unmistakable holy crap moment when you cross 6,000 RPM, that creates legends. So yes, they were engineering excess on purpose. They embraced it. They celebrated it. The VMAX was Yamaha's middle finger to conservative engineering, to sensible design, to playing it safe. Did they know it would eventually cause regulatory problems? Probably. Did they care? Not until they had to. As the 1980s rolled into the 1990s and 2000s, the world started changing. Emissions regulations tightened, safety standards evolved, and the VMAX's engine design became a problem. See, the original VMAX used an air-cooled, carbureted V4, beautiful in its mechanical simplicity, terrible for emissions compliance. European regulators introduced Euro 3 standards, then Euro 4. These mandated catalytic converters, evaporative emissions canisters, computer-controlled fuel injection. The VMAX had none of this. It was a dinosaur from an era before anyone cared about pollution, and retrofitting it, that would require a complete redesign. New fuel system, new exhaust, new engine management. Basically, building an entirely different motorcycle. Yamaha looked at the costs, looked at the compromises required, and made a decision. We're not neutering this beast. In several markets, particularly France, Germany, and Japan, power restrictions were imposed. Factory caps at 100 brake horsepower for a bike designed to make 145. That's like buying a Ferrari and having the dealer install a speed governor at 55 miles per hour. Technically it works, but you've completely missed the point. Japan's domestic market was especially brutal. Government-mandated output limits meant Japanese riders couldn't experience the bike's true performance in their own country. The land that built this monster couldn't legally ride it at full power. Fast forward to 2009. Yamaha decided to take another shot. The second generation VMAX was coming. And holy crap, did they go all in. The new engine displaced 1,679 cubic centimeters, up from the original's 1,198. Power jumped to 197 horsepower with 123 pound-feet of torque. This thing was an absolute monster. They added YCCI, Yamaha chip-controlled intake, which used variable length intake trumpets to optimize airflow at all RPM ranges. This preserved the original's rush, but made it smoother, more controllable, more devastating across the entire power band. The exhaust valve in the exhaust managed back pressure dynamically. More mid-range punch, better top-end rush. It was like they took everything that made the original legendary and turned it up. To address handling criticisms, Yamaha completely redesigned the chassis. Cast aluminum frame rails replaced the old steel tubes, massive forks, radial mount brakes, sophisticated electronics. The 2009 VMAX was safer, more controllable, more refined, but it was also heavier at 310 kilograms wet and still borderline on emissions compliance. And here's the kicker. Yamaha electronically limited the top speed to 137 miles per hour. Not because the engine couldn't go faster, it absolutely could, but because regulators demanded it. Even with all the modern technology, all the refinements, all the compromises, the VMAX was still too wild for the rulemakers. But when Yamaha spent millions redesigning the VMAX for 2009 with modern fuel injection, sophisticated electronics, improved chassis geometry, and every technological advancement available, essentially creating a completely new motorcycle from the ground up. Why didn't they just detune the engine enough to meet emissions and safety standards permanently? Especially since they knew the regulatory environment was only getting stricter. And wouldn't that have been infinitely smarter than investing all that money into a bike they'd have to discontinue anyway just a few years later? Well, let me walk you through their thinking. Yamaha's engineers ran the numbers. They studied the regulations. They knew Euro 4 was coming. They knew emissions standards would keep tightening. They knew the VMAX's days were numbered. And they decided to build it anyway. Because detuning the VMAX enough to meet long-term compliance would have meant gutting its soul. They'd need to reduce power by 30, maybe 40%, completely change the character of the engine, eliminate that V-boost surge, turn it into just another big cruiser. Yamaha said, if we can't build the VMAX properly, we won't build it at all. This wasn't stupidity or short-sightedness. This was principle. They built the 2009 VMAX knowing it would be a limited-time offering, a final celebration of engineering excess, before regulations close the door forever. Think about what that means. They spent millions developing a motorcycle they knew would be discontinued. Not because it failed in the market, not because riders didn't want it, but because the world changed and there was no room left for machines like this. It's simultaneously the most noble and most stubborn decision in automotive history. So why didn't they compromise? Because compromise would have meant betraying everything the VMAX represented. And Yamaha decided that some things like pure, unfiltered performance are worth protecting, even if it means they can't exist forever. But here's where this story takes an unexpected twist that almost nobody talks about. The VMAX was never officially banned, not by a single government decree, not by an explicit law. It was killed by something far more insidious: bureaucratic erosion. See, what happened was a death by 1,000 cuts. Euro 4 emissions standards meant you couldn't sell new ones in Europe after 2016. But existing VMAXs, technically still legal to own and ride. Except insurance companies started charging high premiums. Registration became a nightmare. In some regions, inspections would fail for noise violations, emissions violations, safety violations, anything to keep these bikes off the road. In Japan, the bike's home country, domestic buyers faced power restrictions that made the full power version literally impossible to register. You could buy a VMAX, just not the real one. This is how modern prohibition works. They don't ban things outright. They just make them so difficult, so expensive, so bureaucratically complex to own that they effectively disappear. And that created something fascinating, an underground cult. Because here's the thing, when you tell enthusiasts they can't have something, that they can't own the unrestricted version, that they can't experience the bike as Yamaha intended, they want it even more. Forums exploded with modification guides, how to bypass power restrictions, how to remove speed limiters, how to source parts when Yamaha stopped making them. Owners became outlaws, fighting bureaucracy just for the privilege of riding a banned beast. And that's the real twist. Yamaha didn't just build a motorcycle. They built a legend precisely because it was too wild to exist. The ban didn't kill the VMAX's legacy, it made it immortal. Every surviving VMAX became a cult object, prized not just for performance but for its outlaw status. It represented rebellion against conformity, against safety culture, against the sanitization of motorcycling. Yamaha lost the regulatory battle, but they won the cultural war. Because 30 years later, people still talk about the VMAX with reverence, still hunt for clean examples, still pay premium prices for unmodified originals. Turns out, building something too powerful to be legal is excellent marketing, even if you can't sell it anymore. So if the VMAX's legendary status actually grew, because it was effectively banned and became this forbidden fruit that enthusiasts risked everything to own, rather than being diminished by regulatory prohibition, does that mean Yamaha accidentally discovered that the best way to create an iconic motorcycle is to build something regulators eventually can't allow? And should manufacturers be intentionally pushing boundaries, knowing their bikes will get banned, essentially using prohibition as a marketing strategy to create instant classics? Okay, this is where we get into really fascinating territory, and I'm going to give you the honest answer. First, let's be clear, Yamaha didn't plan for the VMAX to get banned. They weren't running some 4D chess marketing scheme where they thought, let's build something illegal and watch the cult status grow. But they absolutely understood that pushing boundaries creates legends. Think about the most iconic motorcycles in history, the Honda CBR 900RR that was too fast for its class, the Suzuki Hayabusa that triggered speed limiters across the industry, the Kawasaki H2 that terrified everyone who rode it. These bikes became famous precisely because they were excessive. Professional Yamaha's philosophy with the VMAX was simple: build the most thrilling experience possible, worry about consequences later. That approach creates emotional connections with riders that sensible motorcycles never achieve. And here's what's brilliant about it. Once a bike gets banned or restricted, its value skyrockets. Collectors hunt for them. Enthusiasts pay premiums. The bike becomes a time capsule of an era when manufacturers still took risks. So should manufacturers intentionally build bikes they know will get banned? That's ethically complicated. You can't knowingly create dangerous products just for marketing. But should they push boundaries, test limits, build machines that make regulators uncomfortable? Absolutely, because that's where innovation happens. That's where legends are born. The VMAX proves that sometimes the most important thing a motorcycle can do isn't comply with regulations. It's to inspire, to show what's possible when you stop playing it safe. Even if that inspiration has an expiration date, Yamaha didn't set out to create a banned bike, but they created something so uncompromising, so true to its purpose, that the world couldn't handle it. And in doing so, they accidentally proved that prohibition is the ultimate form of validation. By 2016, Euro 4 emission standards delivered the final blow. Yamaha looked at what it would take to keep the VMAX compliant. Massive redesigns, power reductions, character compromises, and they said no. They discontinued production instead. The last VMAXs rolled off assembly lines carrying the weight of history. Final editions, special liveries, collector-focused releases. Yamaha knew these were the end of an era. Official sales ceased in Europe, Japan, and most developed markets. Existing owners found themselves with increasingly rare machines. Parts became scarce. Maintenance became specialized. But here's the thing, the VMAX didn't disappear. It went underground. Enthusiast communities thrived online. Owners shared maintenance tips, modification guides, legal workarounds. Shops specialized in keeping VMAXs running despite manufacturer abandonment. In some regions, riders formed clubs dedicated specifically to bikes that shouldn't exist anymore. Outlaws celebrating outlaw machines. Now looking back at Yamaha's decision to discontinue the VMAX, rather than compromise its performance to meet modern regulations, effectively choosing death over conformity, and considering that today's motorcycle market is dominated by safe, compliant, regulatory-friendly machines that prioritize longevity over excitement. Was Yamaha's stubborn refusal to adapt the VMAX actually a victory for engineering passion and rider experience? Or was it a tragic defeat that signals the end of an era where manufacturers cared more about building thrilling machines than satisfying bureaucrats? And what does it say about the future of motorcycling when the industry's greatest performance icons can no longer exist? Well, from a business perspective, discontinuing the VMAX was probably the right call. The cost to maintain compliance would have been astronomical. Sales volumes were declining. The market was moving away from big, powerful cruisers toward adventure bikes and electric motorcycles. Keeping it alive would have meant either losing money on every sale or compromising it into mediocrity. Neither makes sense financially, but from a cultural perspective, from the perspective of what motorcycles mean to riders, Yamaha's decision was absolutely a victory. Because here's the truth, we have enough compliant motorcycles. We have enough bikes designed by committees, approved by lawyers, neutered by regulators. What we don't have enough of, what we're losing, are machines with soul. The VMAX represented something precious, engineering without apology. It said, this is what we can build when we stop worrying about rules and focus purely on experience. And yes, that era is ending. Modern regulations make it nearly impossible to create bikes like the VMAX. Emission standards, noise regulations, safety mandates, they're all tightening. Are those regulations necessary? Some of them, absolutely. Motorcycles should be cleaner. They should be safer. Progress is good. But we're losing something irreplaceable: the freedom to build excessive machines. Bikes that prioritize thrill over practicality, power over efficiency, experience over compliance. The VMAX's death proves we're entering an era where the wildest machines can't exist. Not because riders don't want them, they do, but because the regulatory environment won't allow it. So was it victory or defeat? It was both. Yamaha won the moral battle. They refused to compromise their vision, but the industry lost something precious: the ability to build legends that break rules. The VMAX's legacy is this: it proved that some machines are worth building even if they can't survive, even if regulations eventually kill them, because the memory of what they achieved, that lasts forever. Today, the VMAX exists in a strange twilight zone, no longer in production, increasingly rare on roads, but immortal in motorcycle culture. Surviving examples command premium prices. Clean, unmodified VMAXs are collector items. Riders who own them treat them like precious artifacts from a bygone era. And Yamaha? Their engineers still speak about the VMAX with pride. Not regret, not shame, but pride. Because they built something that mattered. The spirit of the VMAX lives on in modern Yamaha sport bikes, in their high-performance machines, in their willingness to take risks. But that specific formula of massive displacement, outrageous power, theatrical delivery can't be replicated in today's regulatory environment. The VMAX was the last of its kind, a muscle bike that prioritized experience over everything else. An engine so powerful, it scared regulators into banning it, and that makes it immortal. So here's my question for you. Do you think Yamaha made the right choice discontinuing the VMAX instead of neutering it to meet regulations? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you love diving deep into the shocking truth behind this engine, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We've got more exciting content coming your way.